The space station orbiting planet Kian was unlike anything Captain James Walker had seen before. Through the viewing window of his small Earth ship, he watched the golden rings that surrounded the massive structure shine in the light of the system's blue sun. "Earth Vessel Delta 7, you have permission to dock," a voice crackled through his communication system. "Follow the guide lights to Bay 12. Walker guided his ship carefully toward the flashing blue lights. As an environmental engineer from Earth, he had visited many planets, but Kian was different. Their call for help had been urgent. Their atmosphere was failing, and their best engineers couldn't fix it. The docking bay was empty except for 2 guards in silver uniforms. They stood straight and still as Walker's ship touched down. When he stepped out, the air smelled clean but strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. "Welcome to Kian, Captain Walker," said the taller guard. "King Duhan is waiting for you in the main palace. Please follow us." The walk to the palace showed Walker just how bad things were. The sky above the city was covered by a thick, gray-green cloud. People on the streets wore masks, and many buildings had their windows sealed shut. Through the protective barriers, he could see the city was beautiful, with tall towers made of white stone and gold metal. The palace was the biggest building Walker had ever seen. It reached so high that its top disappeared into the cloudy sky. Inside, everything was clean and bright, but Walker noticed the worry on people's faces as they rushed through the halls. King Duhan sat on a throne made of the same white stone as the city's buildings. He was younger than Walker expected, maybe in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a tired face. "Captain Walker," the king said, standing up, "thank you for coming so quickly. As you can see, we don't have much time." "Your Majesty," Walker bowed slightly. "I studied the data you sent. The atmospheric problems are serious, but I believe they can be fixed." "That's what our engineers said too," a sharp voice cut through the air. Walker turned to see a woman walking into the throne room. She wore a plain gray uniform with a red band on her arm. Her face was beautiful but cold, and her eyes seemed to burn with anger. "Heiyun," King Duhan said in a warning tone, "you will show our guest respect." Heiyun stopped a few steps away from Walker. "Another expert come to tell us how to fix our world." She laughed, but there was no joy in it, like the last 3 who failed. Walker looked at her carefully. He could see the intelligence in her eyes, and something else. Pride, maybe, or determination. "I'm not here to tell you how to fix anything," he said calmly. "I'm here to help, if you'll let me." "Help?" Heiyun's voice was bitter. "Like your kind helped the other worlds they visited." "Enough." King Duhan's voice echoed through the room. "Heiyun, you and your engineers will work with Captain Walker. That is an order." Heiyun's face went blank, but Walker could see her hands shake slightly. She bowed to the king, turned, and walked out without another word. "I apologize for her behavior," King Duhan said. "Heiyun is difficult. She leads our engineering corps, along with Yujin and Jia. They are brilliant, but lately they have become rebellious." Walker watched the door where Heiyun had left. "They're slaves, aren't they?" he asked quietly. The king was silent for a moment. "They are prisoners of war, from worlds that opposed us. Their skills are too valuable to waste." Walker nodded slowly. The situation was more complicated than he had expected. He had come to fix an atmosphere, but now he saw there were other problems just as serious. "I'll need to inspect your terraforming equipment," he said, "and I'll need to work with Heiyun and her team." "Of course," King Duhan agreed. "But be careful, Captain. They may be more dangerous than our failing atmosphere." As Walker left the throne room, he could still smell the metallic air, still see the gray-green clouds through the palace windows. But now he was thinking about Heiyun's angry eyes and wondering if saving this world would mean more than just fixing its sky. The engineering complex was a maze of metal corridors and busy workshops. Walker followed his guide, a young technician, through the winding halls. The air here smelled different, like hot metal and electricity. The main control room is ahead, the technician said, stopping at a large door. The engineering team is waiting for you. When Walker stepped inside, he found 3 women studying a large screen that covered one wall. Hei-yun stood in the middle, with Yu-jin and Jia on either side. The screen showed a complex map of Kian's atmosphere, with red areas marking the worst damage. So the human expert finally comes to see our work, Hei-yun said without turning around. What do you think of our failing atmosphere? Walker walked closer to the screen, studying the patterns. The damage isn't random, he said quietly. These are equipment signatures. Your terraforming machines aren't just failing. They're working against each other. Jia, the youngest of the 3, looked surprised. Yu-jin's eyes narrowed. Hei-yun finally turned to face him. You noticed that quickly, she said. Most visitors take days to see the pattern. I've seen something similar before, Walker explained. On Mars, when we first started fixing its atmosphere, the machines fight each other when they're programming conflicts. Hei-yun crossed her arms. And you think you can fix this, just like that? No, Walker shook his head. I think we can fix this, together. But first, I need to know why the best engineering team I've ever seen is letting their world die. The room went silent. Jia looked at the floor. Yu-jin's face turned hard. But Hei-yun stepped closer to Walker, her eyes burning. Our world, she said softly. This isn't our world. Our worlds were free once, beautiful, until King Do-han's ships came. Now our worlds are part of his empire, and we are his slaves. Walker nodded slowly. And the atmospheric problem, is it really an accident? Hei-yun's smile was sharp. What do you think, human? I think, Walker said carefully, that 3 brilliant engineers could easily make terraforming machines malfunction in ways that would be hard to fix, unless you knew exactly what you were doing. That's a dangerous accusation, Yu-jin said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was cold. It's not an accusation, Walker replied. It's a compliment. The programming is subtle. Perfect, really. The damage is slow enough that evacuation is possible, but fast enough that it can't be ignored. Jia made a small sound of surprise. Hei-yun held up her hand, silencing her. And now that you know this, Hei-yun asked, what will you tell King Do-han? Walker walked to the screen, touching one of the red areas. I'll tell him exactly what I see, that the atmospheric problems are complex but fixable, and that I need full cooperation from you and your team to fix them. And why would we cooperate? Hei-yun demanded. Why would we help save the empire that destroyed our homes? Because right now, you're proving them right, Walker said quietly. Proving that conquered peoples can't be trusted, that they need to be controlled. But what if you proved something else? What if you showed them that free people work better than slaves? The 3 women looked at each other. Walker could see thoughts passing between them in silent glances. You're either very clever or very foolish, Hei-yun finally said. Maybe both. I've been called worse, Walker smiled. Now shall we look at these terraforming controls? The real ones, not the broken ones you show to visitors. For the first time, Hei-yun's smile seemed genuine. She pressed a button, and the screen changed, showing a much more detailed system. Welcome to the real engineering course, Captain Walker, she said. Let's see if you're as good as you think you are. As they began to work, Walker noticed Jia hiding a smile, and even Yu-jin seemed less hostile. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. Outside the complex, the gray-green clouds still swirled, but now Walker knew both their cause and their cure. The question was, could he heal more than just the atmosphere? 3 days after his meeting with the engineering corps, Walker stood before King Do-han and his council. The throne room was full of advisors and nobles, all wearing protective masks against the worsening air. Behind Walker, Hei-yun and her team stood quietly, their faces carefully blank. Captain Walker, King Du-Han said, "You promised us a solution. What have you found?" Walker stepped forward, pressing a button on his tablet. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing a model of Kian's atmosphere. "Your Majesty, the problem is more complex than it first appeared," Walker began. "The terraforming machines aren't just broken. They're fighting each other because they're receiving conflicting commands." The king leaned forward. "Can it be fixed?" "Yes," Walker said, "but not in the way you might expect. On Earth, we learned something important about atmospheric control. Sometimes the best solution is to work with nature, not against it." He pressed another button, and a hologram changed, showing a new system design. "Instead of forcing the atmosphere to change, we can guide it, like steering a river instead of trying to stop it." "What does this mean in practical terms?" one of the advisors asked. "It means we reprogram the terraforming machines to work together, not against each other. We use Earth's bioengineering methods to help the atmosphere heal itself. It's slower than forcing a change, but it's permanent." Hei-Yun stepped forward. "We've studied Captain Walker's solution," she said, her voice steady. "It will work. The engineering corps can implement it within 2 weeks." The room burst into whispers. King Du-Han raised his eyebrows. "You seem very confident, Hei-Yun. This is different from your usual skepticism." "The human solution is elegant," Hei-Yun admitted. "It solves the problem without creating new ones. We can't find any flaws in the design." Walker watched the king study Hei-Yun's face. He could see Du-Han wondering if this was another trick, another act of rebellion. "Show me how it works," the king commanded. For the next hour, Walker explained his plan in detail. He showed how Earth's atmospheric recovery had succeeded by working with natural processes. The engineering court added their own insights, explaining how they could adapt Earth's methods to Kian's environment. "The best part," Walker concluded, "is that once the system is running, it maintains itself. No more constant adjustments, no more fighting against nature." King Du-Han was silent for a long moment. "And you trust this solution, Hei-Yun?" he asked finally. "I do, Your Majesty," she replied. "Captain Walker's approach is different from what we expected. It deserves a chance." The king stood up. "Then you have my approval. Begin immediately." As the council members filed out of the throne room, Walker noticed Jia and Yu-Jin exchanging looks. They hadn't expected Hei-Yun to support his plan so openly. "You surprised them," Walker said quietly to Hei-Yun as they walked back to the engineering complex. "You surprised me first," she replied. "Your solution, it's not about control. It's about balance. That's not how the Empire usually does things." "Maybe it's time for things to change," Walker suggested. Hei-Yun stopped walking. "Change is dangerous, Captain, especially here. More dangerous than what you were planning." Her eyes met his. "Perhaps not. But be careful. The king may have approved your plan, but that doesn't mean everyone will accept it." Walker nodded. He had seen the angry faces among the council members, the ones who didn't like seeing slaves speak as equals. "We'll start tomorrow," Hei-Yun said. "Don't be late. And Captain, thank you for not revealing what you know about the original malfunction. Not everyone would have kept that secret." She walked away, leaving Walker standing in the corridor. Through the windows, he could see the gray-green clouds starting to thin in places. It was a small change, but it was a start. Tomorrow, they would begin the real work, not just fixing the atmosphere, but maybe fixing something more important. 1 week into the atmospheric repair project, Walker sat in his office reviewing the progress reports. The new system was working better than expected. Already, the thick clouds above the city were starting to break up in places, showing patches of purple sky. A knock on his door interrupted his work. It was Jia, the youngest engineer, looking nervous. "Captain Walker," she said quietly, "there's something you need to see." She led him through the complex to a small storage room. Inside, Hei-Yun and Yu-Jin were waiting with a hidden computer screen. We think it's time you knew the whole truth, Hei-yun said. She pressed a button, and images filled the screen. Walker saw pictures of beautiful cities, grand buildings, and advanced technology. But these weren't images of Kian. They were pictures of other worlds. Hei-yun's homeworld, and those of Yu-jin and Jita. These were our homes, Hei-yun explained. We weren't just random prisoners. We were the best scientists and engineers of our worlds. Each of us led teams developing new technology. Yu-jin stepped forward. My world was developing clean energy systems. Jai's people were creating advanced medical technology. Hei-yun's world had almost perfected atmospheric control. The Empire didn't just conquer us, Hei-yun continued. They took our research, our discoveries. Everything we had created to help our people was turned into weapons and tools of control. Walker looked at the images again. He could see why these worlds had been targets. Their technology was advanced, perhaps more advanced than Kian's in some ways. The atmospheric problem, he said slowly, it wasn't just about rebellion, was it? You were trying to show them their mistake. Trying to prove they needed your willing help, not just your forced labor. Jaya nodded, but it didn't work. They just brought in more experts, tried to force solutions. Until you came. You were different, Hei-yun admitted. You didn't try to command us or ignore us. You listened. You saw us as equals. That's why we helped with your solution, Yu-jin added. But now, there's a new problem. Hei-yun touched the screen again, showing a message written in the Empire's language. Some of the king's advisors are angry. They say we're becoming too independent, too confident. They want us separated and sent to different facilities once the atmospheric work is done. Walker felt anger rise in his chest. The engineering team wasn't just efficient. They were brilliant together. Separating them would be both cruel and foolish. They can't do that, he said. The atmospheric system needs all of you to maintain it. I'll tell the king. No, Hei-yun interrupted. If you defend us too openly, they'll suspect you of helping our rebellion. We need to be smarter than that. What do you suggest? A small smile appeared on Hei-yun's face. We have a plan. But we'll need your help. And it's dangerous. If we fail, you could lose more than just your position here. Walker looked at each of them. Hei-yun's determined face, Yu-jin's careful watch, Jaya's hopeful eyes. He thought about their lost homes, their stolen work, their broken dreams. Then he thought about how much they had already achieved together in just 1 week. Tell me the plan, he said. As Hei-yun explained their idea, Walker understood why the king's advisors were afraid. These women weren't just engineers. They were leaders who had never stopped fighting for their freedom. And now, with his help, they might finally have a chance to win it back. Outside the small room, the patches of purple sky grew larger, but the real changes were happening here, in whispered plans and growing trust between former enemies. The warning alarms woke Walker in the middle of the night. Red lights flashed through the corridors as he ran toward the engineering complex. The air felt wrong, too thick, too heavy. When he reached the main control room, he found chaos. Engineers rushed between stations, shouting numbers and warnings. Hei-yun stood at the central console, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. What happened? Walker asked, joining her. The northern atmospheric processor is failing, Hei-yun said, her voice tight with worry. The old programming is fighting back against our changes. If it continues, it could trigger a chain reaction. On the main screen, red warning lights spread across the map of Kian. The atmospheric balance they had worked so hard to create was falling apart. How long do we have? Walker asked. 2 hours, maybe less. Yu-jin answered from another console. If we don't stop it, the damage will be permanent. Millions could die. Jaya looked up from her calculations. The automatic controls aren't responding. Someone will have to go to the facility and make the changes manually. In this weather, Yu-jin shook her head. The storms are too strong. The transport systems are already shut down. Walker studied the facility's location on the map. It was on the edge of the city, where the storms were worst. How do we get there? We don't, Hei-yun said firmly. It's too dangerous. We need another solution. But Walker saw the fear in her eyes. There was no other solution, and she knew it. Someone had to reach that facility. I'll go, he said. I know the new system better than anyone else. I can make the changes. No. Hei-yun grabbed his arm. The storms will kill you. The acid rain alone will melt through standard protection gear in minutes, Walker finished. But my Earth suit is designed for worse conditions. It might last long enough. The room went quiet. Everyone knew he was right, but no one wanted to say it. I'm going with you, Hei-yun declared. You can't, Walker said. You're needed here to coordinate. Besides, I only have one suit. Hei-yun looked like she wanted to argue, but another alarm interrupted them. The situation was getting worse. The repair shuttle is in Bay 3, Jaya said quietly. I've loaded the override codes you'll need. Walker nodded. As he turned to leave, Hei-yun caught his hand. Why are you doing this? She asked. This isn't your world. These aren't your people. Walker smiled slightly. Maybe it's time they became my people too. The journey to the facility was a nightmare. Wind and acid rain battered the small repair shuttle. Twice, Walker almost lost control. When he finally reached the facility, he had to force the outer door open against the storm. Inside, emergency lights cast red shadows as he made his way to the control room. His suit's sensors were already warning of damage from the acid rain. He didn't have much time. The facility's main computer came to life under his hands. As he worked to change the programming, he could hear Hei-yun's voice through his communicator, guiding him through each step. Warning. Critical system failure imminent, the computer announced. Almost there, Walker muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. The last override code triggered a surge of power that knocked him off his feet. For a moment, everything went dark. Then the backup systems came online, and Walker heard something he never expected. Hei-yun's laughter. It's working. Her voice came through the static. The atmospheric readings are stabilizing. You did it. Walker looked out the facility's window. Through breaks in the storm clouds, he could see patches of clear purple sky. More importantly, he could see the worry and fear fading from Hei-yun's voice, replaced by something that sounded almost like hope. 3 days after the crisis at the northern facility, Walker stood before King Dohan again. This time, the throne room's windows showed clear purple skies. The protective masks were gone, and fresh air filled the palace. You have done the impossible, Captain Walker, King Dohan said. His voice carried through the quiet room. You not only fixed our atmosphere but risked your life to save it. Kian owes you a great debt. Walker bowed slightly. The engineering corps deserves the credit, Your Majesty. Without their help, I would have failed. The king smiled. Yes, Hei-yun and her team have shown remarkable dedication lately. It seems your influence has changed them. They only needed a chance to prove themselves, Walker replied carefully. King Dohan stood from his throne and walked closer. Perhaps you are right, which is why I have made a decision. He turned to address the whole court. From this day forward, the engineering corps will be under Captain Walker's direct authority. The announcement caused a stir in the throne room. Walker kept his face neutral, but his mind raced. This was unexpected. Your Majesty honors me, he said, but may I ask why? You have shown that you can work with them, lead them effectively, the king explained. More importantly, they respect you. That is rare and valuable. Later, in the engineering complex, Walker found Hei-yun and her team waiting for him. They had already heard the news. So, Hei-yun said, you are our new master. Her voice was careful, hiding her true thoughts. No, Walker shook his head. I'm your new shield. Jin looked confused. Shield. The king's advisors wanted you separated, remember? Walker explained. Now they can't touch you without going through me first. And I'm not just a slave engineer. I'm Earth's representative. Understanding dawned on Hei-yun's face. Clever human, she said softly. You're using your position to protect us. It's more than that, Walker continued. With my authority, we can start making real changes, better working conditions, more freedom for research, maybe even contact with your homeworlds. Jaya's eyes widened. Is that possible? It won't be easy, Walker admitted. But the king trusts me now. And after what happened at the northern facility, no one can deny your value to Kian. Hei-yun studied him for a long moment. You nearly died saving this world, she said. Why do you keep helping us? Walker looked around the room, at the faces of these brilliant women who had been treated like property for so long. Because you deserve better, he said simply. And because I've seen what we can achieve when we work together as equals. Something changed in Hei-yun's expression. The wall of distrust she had maintained for so long seemed to crack. As equals, she repeated. Then she smiled. A real smile, without bitterness or anger. Very well, Captain. Show us how to make these changes you promise. Over the next few hours, they planned together. Walker shared what he knew about Earth's diplomatic protocols. The engineers described their world's customs and traditions. Together, they began building something new, not just a better atmospheric system, but a bridge between different cultures. Outside, the purple sky of Kian shone clearly for the first time in years. But the real transformation was happening inside the engineering complex, where former slaves and their supposed master were laying the groundwork for a future none of them had imagined possible. 1 month after Walker took charge of the engineering corps, the changes were visible throughout the complex. The locked doors were gone, replaced by open workspaces. The engineers no longer wore prisoner uniforms, but professional attire of their own choosing. Most importantly, the fear that had haunted their eyes had disappeared. In the main laboratory, Walker watched Hei-yun present her latest project to a group of Kian scientists. She stood confident and tall, explaining a new method for improving energy efficiency in the atmospheric processors. The scientists listened with respect, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. Your approach is revolutionary, one senior scientist said. We never considered combining our technology with Earth's methods this way. Hei-yun nodded gracefully. Different perspectives often lead to better solutions, she replied, glancing at Walker with a slight smile. After the presentation, Walker found Jin in the computer center, teaching young Kian engineers about clean energy systems. Her students watched eagerly as she demonstrated techniques from her homeworld. The Empire's technology is powerful, Jin explained to them, but it uses too much energy. My people learn to accomplish more with less. Now I can share that knowledge freely. In the medical wing, Jaya worked with a team developing new healing technologies. She combined her world's advanced medical knowledge with Kian's resources, creating treatments that could help millions. Captain Walker, she called out when she saw him. Our results are exceeding expectations. The hospitals are already asking when they can begin using our new methods. Walker felt pride as he observed their work. These women had transformed from reluctant slaves into respected teachers and innovators. Their knowledge, once suppressed, was now helping Kian advance in ways its leaders had never imagined. Later that day, Hei-yun found Walker in his office, reviewing progress reports. The king's advisors visited today, she said, sitting down across from him. They seemed surprised by our achievements. Good surprised or bad surprised? Walker asked. Both, I think. They cannot deny our success, but it challenges their beliefs about conquered peoples. Hei-yun paused, then added softly, You have changed everything, James. It was the first time she had used his first name. Walker looked up, seeing new warmth in her eyes. We changed everything together, he corrected. I just opened the door. You and your team walked through it. Next week, we begin sending messages to our homeworlds, He-Yun said. The king approved the communication channels you requested. Our families will know we are safe and treated with respect now. Walker nodded, remembering how hard he had fought for that permission. It's a start. Maybe one day we might visit them. He-Yun finished. Perhaps. But for now, we have work here. Important work. She was right. The engineering corps was becoming a model for other facilities throughout the empire. Other conquered peoples were being given more freedom, more opportunities to contribute their knowledge. Did you ever imagine this? Walker asked. When you first met me. He-Yun laughed softly. I thought you were just another human who would try to control us. Instead, you showed us how to be free while serving a greater purpose. Through the window, they could see the beautiful purple sky they had saved together. But the real miracle wasn't the healed atmosphere. It was the healing of the wounds between peoples, the building of bridges where walls had stood before. 6 months after Walker's arrival on Kian, King Duhan called a special gathering in the palace's grand hall. Representatives from all parts of the empire had come to witness something unprecedented, the signing of new laws that would change how the empire treated its conquered peoples. Walker stood near the front of the hall, watching as He-Yun addressed the assembly. She spoke with quiet confidence about the engineering corps' achievements and what they had learned about cooperation between different worlds. Our success proves that force is not the best way to gain knowledge and progress, she said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. When people work together freely, sharing their wisdom and respecting each other's skills, everyone benefits. The king nodded from his throne. The engineering corps has shown us a better path, he announced. Therefore, today we sign new laws. All technical teams throughout the empire will follow their example. No more slaves, only partners in progress. As He-Yun returned to her place beside Walker, he could see tears in her eyes. I never thought I would see this day, she whispered. Yu-Jin and Jaya stood nearby, watching as the king signed the new laws. Their faces showed mixture of joy and disbelief as years of planning and hope finally bore fruit. After the ceremony, Walker found himself in the palace gardens with He-Yun. The evening air was clean and sweet, carrying the scent of Kian's native flowers. Earth has requested my return, Walker said quietly. They want me to help other worlds with their atmospheric problems. He-Yun turned to face him. Will you go? That depends, Walker replied. The king has offered to make the engineering corps an independent organization, working with both Earth and Kian. We could help many worlds together. We, He-Yun's voice held a note of hope. If you want. Walker smiled. You would be the director, of course. I would just be your Earth liaison. He-Yun laughed softly. Always so careful with power, James. That's why we grew to trust you. She looked up at the clear purple sky. Yes, I think we would like that. All of us. There are many worlds that need our help. Later that evening, in the engineering complex, Walker watched as his team celebrated. Jaya was explaining their new status to excited junior engineers. Yu-Jin was already planning projects for other worlds that needed help. The room buzzed with energy and possibility. Captain Walker, King Duhan's voice surprised him. The king had come to the celebration without his usual guards. Or should I say, Director of Interplanetary Relations. Walker bowed slightly. Your Majesty honors us with your presence. No, the king shook his head. You have honored us by showing us a better way. Sometimes it takes an outsider to help us see our own mistakes. He looked around the room. They are happy now. Free. And we are stronger for it. Wisdom comes in many forms, Your Majesty, Walker replied. Sometimes we just need to learn how to listen. As the celebration continued, Walker thought about his journey on Kian. He had come to fix an atmosphere, but had helped heal something far deeper. The barriers between peoples had begun to fall, replaced by bridges of understanding and respect. He-Yun appeared at his side, her face glowing with happiness. Thinking deep thoughts, James. Thinking about the future, he replied. "About all the good we can do together." She took his hand, a gesture that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "Then let's begin," she said. "We have worlds to heal, bridges to build, and stars to reach." Above them, through the complex's crystal dome, the first stars of evening appeared in Kian's perfect purple sky, a sky that now promised not just life for one world, but hope for many.